The Battle of Maychew was the final and decisive confrontation between the invading forces of fascist Italy and the imperial army of Emperor Haile Selassie in the Second Italo-Ethiopian War. Outnumbered and certainly outgunned, roughly 30,000 Ethiopian tribesmen and the emperor's own imperial guard would throw themselves at 40,000 well-entrenched Italian and Eritrean troops in a desperate bid to turn the tide. At its end, around 5,000 Ethiopians lay dead upon the field, alongside 1,200 invaders. Most importantly of all, however, the war, which had begun 6 months earlier, has swung inexorably in Italy's favour. On the 3rd of October 1935, General Emilio de Bono, under the direction of the Duce Benito Mussolini, initiated the largest invasion in African history. On the northern front, advancing from Eritrea, he commanded 174,000 infantry, 580 artillery pieces, 112 tanks, 3,683 vehicles, 4,209 machine guns, and 276 flamethrowers. The Regio Aeronautica, the Italian Air Force, deployed 130 machines, 45 of which were bombers, and most incidental to the campaign given the lack of Ethiopian fighter opposition. The southern front would be significantly smaller and was originally conceived to divide Ethiopian forces and defend Italian holdings in East Africa. As such, General Rodolfo Graziani advanced from Italian Somaliland at the head of 50,000 men, with a smaller concentration of modern equipment. As was well known at the time, the Italians also made heavy use of chemical weapons. These were organised by De Bono under the ominously titled K Service, in direct contravention of international treaty. Despite facing an enemy who could realistically only field roughly 5,000 modern troops in the Imperial Guard, with the bulk of its 500,000 men lacking any modern military training, the campaign was a halting, stuttering affair. A combination of poor command, military ineptitude, and harsh geography resulted in the advance stalling barely beyond the frontier after 2 weeks of war. There was some good news, however. The city of Adwa fell on the 6th of October, avenging the fallen of 1896. The defeat of the Italian army by the then Emperor Menelik II had burned itself into the Italian national psyche. It had been the first time a European power was not only decisively checked in Africa by Africans, but undeniably defeated, thus humiliating the still young nation before the concert of other European powers. Winston Churchill believed that to proclaim their manhood by avenging Adwa meant almost as much to Italy as the recovery of Alsace-Lorraine did in France. De Bono had achieved the dream of a generation, and so went his incentive to further, possibly fatal action. A visit by Marshal Pietro Badoglio on the 27th of October concluded that De Bono was substantially static both in spirit and in function. New blood was seemingly required. On the 14th of November, Mussolini dismissed his long-term ally and replaced him with Badoglio. If this change was meant to expedite a quick resolution to the war, it did nothing of the sort. It would be another 5 months before the Marshal's armies would face the Emperor at Maychew, and in the intervening time, the war's outcome would be thought to hang in the balance despite Italy's overwhelming technological advantage. By the 31st of March, however, such victories as were won during the December to January Christmas offensives were a thing of the past, and the series of heavy losses incurred by the Ethiopian forces had whittled their options down to a final, desperate gambit. Even the Emperor had grave doubts about the upcoming battle, but felt that honour demanded they make the attempt regardless. Selassie made his headquarters in a cave at Mount Aya, close to the town of Korum in the province of Tigray. Here, his chiefs and advisors gathered on the 22nd of March, and the Emperor made it known that he intended to attack that very night. What followed was days of argument and debate, with chiefs pointing out that many of their men had yet to arrive, alongside critical supplies. This delay well may have been detrimental to the Ethiopian cause. Having learned of their commitment to stand and fight, Badoglio set about fortifying his positions in the mountains and passes which led back to the village of Maychew. He could be confident of his information, for it was not only derived from signal intercepts, but traitors within the Ethiopian camp. The Izubu Gala, ever hostile to the Amara ruling elite, were being courted by both sides. When visiting the Emperor in the days leading up to the battle, they came armed with new Italian rifles and left bedecked in silk shirts and satin capes. In exchange, they promised to attack the Italians in the rear, although everyone involved knew that their allegiance was an unknowable variable until the moment of decision. The need to bring the Gala over to their side had contributed to the Ethiopian delay, and Selassie could only hope the attempt would not prove deadly in its futility. After over a week in waiting, the day of the attack was set for the 31st of March, St. George's Day, considered an auspicious sign by the Ethiopians. At 5:45 a.m, the sounding of 2 rifle shots announced the beginning of the battle. In a concentrated enfilade, the Ethiopian mortars and meagre artillery opened a blistering refrain against the Alpina Pusteria division on the Italian right flank upon Mount Bahora. In the ensuing gunnery duel, all of the officers of the opposing 8th Battery were killed, while the Intra, Feltre and Pieve di Teco battalions bore the brunt of the bombardment. At the same time, troops under Ras Getachew Abate assaulted the Alpini's positions, and after making negligible gains, were halted as the Italians recovered from the initial shock. Had they succeeded, they would have been able to dominate the battlefield and turn the Italian flank. However, it was not to be. The fighting continued, but critically, the line held. The next attempt was comprised of 15,000 men under Ras Casa Haile Selassie at 7 a.m. Rather than committing more forces to their assault up the mountain against the Alpini, the Ethiopians switched their attention to the central Meccan Pass on the Pusteria division's left flank. Supported by their artillery, including 8 Oerlikon anti-aircraft guns, one of which was manned by Haile Selassie himself, the Second Eritrean division was pushed back further up the pass. Here, Kassa exerted considerable pressure on the gap separating the 2nd from its sister division, the 1st Eritrean, on the far left. Seeing the potential threat, the Italians deployed 60 machines of the Regio Aeronautica, reaping a bloody toll even as the Oerlikons were forced skyward. The only saving grace of such close-quarter fighting was that it denied the Italians the use of chemical weapons, lest they inadvertently poisoned their own men. Meanwhile, as the struggle in the centre continued, 4,000 men under Ras Ceu Mangasha had been swinging around the far left flank of the Italian line. They attempted to insinuate themselves between the Eritrean 1st Division and the embattled 2nd, however were beaten off by divisional artillery. By 9 a.m, the assault was grinding to a halt. Under the withering fire of Italian machine guns, artillery and bombers, the enemy line refused to break. The Emperor therefore chose to commit his Imperial Guard in a hope to end the stalemate. With singular elan, the best trained battalions of the Ethiopian army threw themselves into the fray. After 3 hours of battle, they successfully pushed the Second Eritreans back to the saddle of the pass, engaging in hand-to-hand combat as they tried to turn the intersecting flanks of the Alpini and the Second Eritrean. It was here, however, that they faced the defences constructed in the week's interim between the Italians' arrival at Maychew and the Ethiopians giving battle. In what Badoglio would later describe as an avalanche of fire, the Imperial Guard and the units of Ras Casa launched attack after attack in an attempt to crack the Italian line, having inflicted significant casualties on the defenders, in particular the mauling of the 10th Eritrean Battalion, who lost all of its officers and most of its men. By 4 p.m, any hope of a breakthrough was slipping away. At this juncture, as rain began to fall, the Emperor sent in the remainder of his reinforcements. After so many hours of successive batterings, a breach was made between the Eritrean divisions, but it proved beyond the exhausted attackers' waning strength to widen it. By 7 o'clock, it was clear the Ethiopians had failed, and a general retreat was ordered. In the ensuing chaos, with so many commanders wounded or killed, and the Italian guns still pounding away, the Azibu Gala made their move. As the bloodied remnants fell back, their alleged allies charged them with cavalry and sniped into the disintegrating mass of men. By the time the fighting was done, the chiefs had lost all stomach for continuing the fight, despite the Emperor's wish to renew the attack the next day. With a further 3 Italian divisions in reserve, it seems unlikely a second day's fighting would have changed the outcome. Rather, it would have given Badoglio's forces the opportunity to destroy the Emperor's army in the field, a feat, it must be admitted, he instead achieved through the use of air power, chemical weapons and gala attacks as the withdrawal turned into a harried rout over the following days. The Emperor headed into exile on the 2nd of May on the recommendation of his ruling council, and 7 days later Mussolini declared victory in East Africa. It was a premature celebration, with many more battles still to come for the occupiers, but by February of 1937 the country had settled into an uneasy peace. Now the guerrilla patriot struggle began in earnest, and it would be over 4 long years before the Emperor could return home to claim his throne.